Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Our topic this first hour is election 2014, and we're going to spend some time looking at some of those races around the country that are going to make a difference in not only the complexion of the United States Senate, but how that will affect various governors' races and state legislative races and how it will affect you. So I certainly want to encourage you, if you have a comment or a question, to give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. Second hour, we're going to be talking with Bobby Schuller a little bit, and then we're going to get back into the news. Again, a lot on the Ebola crisis front, so we'll talk about that in the second hour. But first hour, we have with us for a while Dr. Ralph Reed. He is founder and chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition, has served in the past as the executive director of the Christian Coalition and also the chairman of the Georgia Republican Party. Last time we had him on, talked about his very good book, Awakening, How America Can Turn from Economic and Moral Destruction Back to Greatness. It's published by Worthy. We also have information about that on our website. But today we're going to focus some time and attention on these very important elections. Ralph Reed, welcome back to Point of View.
Thanks so much, Kerby. Good to be with you.
I guess the big question that everybody asks before we get into the specific races, are you expecting what some people might call a GOP wave? Michael Barone said, well, maybe it depends on how you define wave. If you assume that there are enough Senate races that the Republican take over the Senate, well, that would be something. Nobody expected you're going to have a lot of new pickups in the House of Representatives. But what are your thoughts about what it looks like as we come into these final weeks before the election?
I don't really see this as a wave election, Kerby, and the main reason why is because the Republicans already had that. It was 2010. They
True.
picked up 63 House seats and 6 Senate seats. The 63 House seats was the highest number gained by either party since, I think, the 1920s. It was bigger than the 94 landslide when they picked up 53 House seats. So what I've seen in my career is this is what's known among political scientists as a 6-year-itch election. That is to say, the second off-year or midterm election of a 2-term presidency. So think of 1958 for Eisenhower, 74 for Nixon Ford, 66 for Kennedy Johnson, 98 for Bill Clinton, 06 for Bush. And what you find is if a president has not yet had that sort of mid-course correction election, that sort of backlash election, they usually have it now. Bush definitely had it in 06.
06.
Lost, I believe, 30 House seats and 7 Senate seats, and lost control of both chambers as a result. Obviously, in 74, that was the Watergate year. Nixon had just resigned a few months earlier. The Republicans lost, I think it was 48 House seats. But this didn't happen to Clinton in 98 because it had already happened in 94.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to happen to Obama in 2014 because it already happened to him in 2010. There's probably no more than a dozen to high teens House seats in play on either side of the ball. I mean, in the entire country, out of, 435 House seats, you can probably count on 2 hands right now the ones that are too close to call. That's how uncompetitive
Right.
the House terrain is, in part because of reapportionment. What we do have is an ideal opportunity for Republicans to gain control of the U.S. Senate because there are 3 seats that are pretty much, they're not gone because South Dakota's now come back into play, but South Dakota, Montana, and West Virginia are all but done to done. These are open seats. They're not incumbents running for re-election. That would get the Republicans to 48. Then they would have to win at least 2 of 4 deep red states where Democratic incumbents who voted for Obamacare are on the ballot. And that's Kay Hagan in North Carolina, Mark Pryor in Arkansas, Mary Landrieu in Louisiana, and Mark Begich in Alaska. Every one of those states Romney carried. Every one of those states is trending deep red with strong Republican Senate candidates and very vulnerable incumbents. So they'd have to get at least 2 of those 4, and then they're at 50, and then they would need 1 of any of the remaining Senate seats that are in play. That would be Iowa, where Tom Harkin's retired. That would be Colorado, Michigan. Those are probably the most likely. But then the real challenge for the Republicans, I don't want to say the real challenge, but then the back-end challenge is you can't lose anywhere else.
That's right.
And as you know, Kansas has really come into play.
I was going to ask about Kansas, yeah.
You know, my sense is that the Republicans and Pat Roberts found out that he was having a near-death experience in time to correct it, but it remains to be seen. I mean, the Democrats definitely had an important preliminary victory when the Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate decided to drop out. And when he dropped out, as you probably know, the Republican Secretary of State went into court and tried to force the Democrats to qualify another candidate in his stead. And the courts have ruled against him, and so there will be no Democratic Senate candidate on November 4th. And it just gives you a feel for what a problematic and difficult cycle this is for the Democrats when their only strategy to hang on to the Senate is to get their candidates to drop out. That's the only hope they have.
It is. And in just a minute, I'm going to take a break because we have one of our mandatory breaks coming up. But I posted a piece by Dick Morris where he talked about using the false flag plan because you have some that are, quote, running as independents, but they're really going to, of course, caucus with the Democrats. But let me just mention, as we go to a break, one of the things we've done is posted a very good piece that kind of gives you a map, the battle for the Senate, and then that article I just mentioned. But most importantly, I would encourage all of you to go to our website. In the very middle, it says Election Resources. And as you go there, you will see that we have resource documents. We have Are You Registered to Vote? Some of you are still in states where you could register to vote if you have not. And to make sure that you are. Some audio, some video, some articles, but most importantly, these voter guides. And it is a very complete list. I might mention, for example, today, since we're talking with Ralph Reed, Faith and Family Coalition, we have a link that you can click on that will give you their congressional scorecard. You can go to the Family Research Council scorecard. You can see the Christian Voter Guide. You can see the American Family Association Voter Guide. You can click on the state groups. That will actually connect you to all the various groups tied in through Citizen Link, through Focus on the Family, so that you can follow what is happening in your particular state. We have all sorts of other voter guides and resources that are available there. So I just encourage you to make sure that if you are still thinking about some of these very important races. Some of these voter guides simply go down to the state level, perhaps a governor's race or something of that nature. Obviously, they will cover the Senate races that we're talking about today and some of the races in the House of Representatives. But a few of these go even deeper in there and gives you more information. So let me encourage you to be an educated voter. We'll continue our conversation with Ralph Reed right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
Most of the concern expressed about Obamacare focuses on the immediate impact while ignoring the long-term effects of the law. Dr. Merrill Matthews explains in a recent column that the bigger problem will arise in a few years. Insurance actuaries call this problem a health care death spiral. In the near term, many will experience sticker shock when they discover how much their insurance premiums will cost them. Those most affected will be likely young and healthy people who live in states that manage to keep health insurance premiums relatively low. On the other hand, people with chronic illnesses or other expensive medical conditions will be joining exchanges. Many of the larger health insurers are actually avoiding these exchanges because they believe that just such people will be joining the exchanges and have medical conditions that will be expensive to treat. The costs might exceed the premiums they're able to collect. Meanwhile, the young and healthy are likely to avoid joining an exchange since they will be charged much more under Obamacare than they would have been paid in the past. The law is designed to overcharge the young and healthy so that older and sicker people can be charged less. The problem only gets worse in subsequent years. As a disproportionate number of sick people enroll in the pool, the cost of an insurance policy will rise. These premium increases will drive healthy people out of the pool looking for lower rates that match their healthy condition. As the pool gets smaller and sicker, rates will go up once again. That will drive out another wave of people until the pool is very small and very sick. This is what insurance actuaries call a death spiral. Put simply, the challenge at the moment is to get young and healthy people to sign up for exchanges, but the bigger challenge in the future will be to get them to stay once they find out how unaffordable Obamacare is for them. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Continue our conversation with Ralph Reed. Again, he's the founder and chairman of Faith and Freedom Coalition. By the way, we have a very good link to their website under the web links, and I would encourage you to go there, get some of their information. Might even hit that like button so you can follow them on Facebook. And, of course, we have posted a couple of articles. One I don't want to spend a lot of time on, but, Ralph, you sort of mentioned it a minute ago, and that is you have these situations, Dick Morris calls them the false flag individuals, but these are individuals running as libertarian, running as independent, but if indeed they were elected, they would then caucus with the Democrats. We mentioned Kansas, so let's just use that as a good example. You have Norm Orman jumped into the race as an independent. You pointed out, of course, the Democrat jumped back. And I think there's some people that if they're not familiar with the way in which party politics work might say, well, it might be good to have somebody who's independent, not Republican, not a Democrat. They'll just be independent and they'll vote their conscience. But the reality is when it comes time to caucus in either the House or the Senate, the independents always end up caucusing with the Democrats. And so it's a vote for a Democrat, is it not?
No question about it. And, This is a new strategy for the Democrats, but it's one that they're executing with a great deal of intensity this go-around. And Greg Orman, who you mentioned, actually ran against Pat Roberts earlier in a previous election as a Democrat. He declines to say who he's going to caucus with.
Right.
And I think given the fact that he's given thousands of dollars to Democratic candidates, given the fact that he's run as a Democrat before, and given the fact that he declines to say who he's going to caucus with now, I think the safe assumption is a vote for Greg Orman in Kansas, is a vote for Harry Reid to continue as House I mean, as a Senate Majority Leader. And, it's disingenuous. I don't think he's really being upfront with the voters, but of course I understand why, because Kansas is an overwhelmingly Republican state, and he's worried that if he tells them he's going to caucus with the Democrats, it'll hurt his candidacy. And it's not that dissimilar to what we're seeing now with
you got South Dakota,
Allison Lundgren Grimes in Kentucky declining to say who she voted for president, which seems to me a little cute by half. I mean, obviously it's a secret ballot, but all she'd have to say is, look, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I voted for Barack Obama for president, but I've been disappointed by some of the things you've done, and just leave it at that. But the fact that she won't, come clean and be honest tells you they're hiding something. And this is really the point, Kerby.
Sure.
The reason why we do what we do at Faith and Freedom Coalition, and we're distributing over 39 million impressions of voter guides online this year. This will be the first time in my career I'll spend more money online than I will offline.
Amazing.
These are videos, they're banner ads, they're emailed and texted voter guides. Then we're distributing another 20 million voter guides in over 100,000 churches nationwide. People can look at those voter guides by just going to... We're trying to ensure that one party or the other controls Congress. It's because we truly believe it's a public service for Christian voters who simply don't have the information on where these candidates stand on the issues that burn in their heart and give meaning to their soul. When it comes to issues like the sanctity of life, the moral issues, the media is not going to tell you where these candidates stand. In a lot of cases, the candidates themselves are hiding where they stand. And we actually do the research, we document it, we let the chips fall where they may. If the Republican is pro-choice or pro-same-sex marriage, we tell you.
Yes, you do.
And we put it out there. And I think, the Bible says my people perish for lack of knowledge. Knowledge is power, and you cannot be an effective citizen if you're not equipped properly with knowledge and information.
Well, and again, I want to alert our listeners. I mean, if you are, for example, in Kansas, we just told you a little bit about Greg Orman, or if you're in Kentucky, Allison Grimes, but also I might mention South Dakota, North Dakota. There are a number of situations in which I think you need some discernment, and that's why, as we've mentioned before, we have today a direct link to Faith and Freedom Coalition, or if you go to the election resources, that voter guide there, as you go to it, will link you to them. So I certainly encourage you to find information from them and to have, as we have said before, maybe tell others about this resource so that they will cast an intelligent decision about this. And Ralph, I thought just for a minute, you're talking about Christian voters. Let's get the bad news. There are a lot of individuals that are listening to this program, hopefully not a whole lot, but there are some listening to this program that aren't even registered to vote, and there are others then that are registered to vote that will not vote in November. But you've looked at those numbers in terms of what the potential is for the Christian vote, and then what the reality is on how many Christians actually vote in an off-year election. What do those numbers look like?
Yeah, if you look at 2012, just as an example, there were approximately 31 million self-identified born-again Christians who went to the polls in November of 2012. Give or take 31 million, based on exit polling and post-election polling. It was approximately 24% of the entire election, so roughly 1 out of every 4 voters was a self-identified evangelical Christian out of 131 million votes, total cast. We estimate, based on census data as well as our own micro-targeting, that approximately 17 million Christians were adult age eligible to vote and did not go to the polls. About half of those, about 9 million of them, were registered but didn't bother to show up, and about 8 million were not registered. Did it change the outcome of the election? Potentially. Those voters voted about 78 to 79% for Mitt Romney and only about 20% for Barack Obama. So had another 17 million voted, you're never going to get all 17 million. But in the right states, I think Obama won Florida by 73,000 votes. won Ohio by, give or take 100,000 votes. It definitely could have changed the outcome of the election, no question about it.
So again, I would encourage those of you listening, if you are registered to vote, make sure as you go to our election resources, you click on that little button to make sure that you are registered to vote. We found, according to George Barna's statistics, is up to 14% of Americans who think they're registered to vote are not. Number two, if you are in a state where you can still register individuals to vote, consider what you might do to encourage your friends, neighbors, coworkers, church members to do so, because those are some very important action items as well. Can we talk strategy for just a minute? There was a good piece the other day by an individual that has been writing about some of these issues for some time, and he was making the case, and even our own co-anchor here, Kelly Shackelford, on Friday. So whether you look at Don Federer or whether Kelly Shackelford, they've all said that the problem with the Republican Party this time seems to be that they're trying to beat something with nothing. In other words, they're saying, we're better than Obama. We don't like Obamacare. But it seems to me that a positive vision, and you certainly talk about that in your book, Awakening, is something that seems to be missing from a lot of these campaigns.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think Reince Priebus has tried to correct that by unveiling his 6 principles, including energy independence, Keystone Pipeline, fiscal responsibility, a return to constitutional government, respect for traditional moral values, education reform, accountability, school choice. So in 6 issue areas, including moral values and family, religious freedom, education, taxes, spending, energy. He's laid out an agenda, and I think that's good. It's certainly better than nothing, and I applaud Reince for doing that. I think that what has been needed and what we don't yet have, and you referenced one of the last chapters in Awakening, I actually lay out a very specific policy agenda on everything from health care to education to spending, relieving the crushing tax burden on the American family, job creation. I mean, just go down the line. I think you got to put some policy meat on those sort of thematic bones of principles. We don't have a contract with America. We don't have anything that really looks like a policy agenda. Now, I think the challenge has been that while there's unanimity on an issue like repealing Obamacare, there's not a consensus on what to replace it with. And it may well be that we're not really going to have that unless and until we have a president that we can work with in 2017. But I do think that Republicans would have been wiser to have had an agenda. You mentioned in your introduction to me, Kerby, that I was chairman of the Georgia Republican Party 12 years ago when we had the biggest landslide election since Reconstruction. And one of the things we did was we put together a declaration of a new Georgia that laid out specific policies. I think voters need to know what you're going to do if they give you the job.
We'll be right back.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Let's open your phones. I'd love to give you a chance to join our conversation today. Perhaps you are watching a race or concerned about what is happening right now. Maybe you have some thoughts or questions about political strategy. Ralph Reed can stay with us for a little bit longer. We'll continue taking phone calls even after he leaves. And so if you'd like to join the conversation, ask a question, 1-800-351-1212. Let me again encourage you to click on that button that we have established there today for the election resources, and also go to the web links, and Faith and Family Coalition are there as well. Just a minute ago, Ralph, of course, you were talking about what is chapter 14 in your book, 20 pages of great material, a bold pro-family plan. It's in your book, Awakening. People can find it perhaps in their local bookstore. We have it in our Point of View store, but I know they can also get it from you. But I would encourage people to read it. And it gets back to this comment that Don Federer said, if indeed everybody took the Republican strategy, you'd have churches saying, well, join us for Sunday worship. Why? Well, we'll get back to you after we're checking with our focus group. Or shop at Macy's. We're not Gimbals. I mean, you have to provide a positive alternative. And as you pointed out, when you were the chairman of the Georgia Republican Party, first time you ever had a statewide Republican governor, you had a third U.S. senator since Reconstruction. You give people a positive reason for voting for you, and that seems to be missing in some of these various campaigns right now.
Yeah, I think, as I said, part of it is the reality that, if you get elected, you're still dealing with Obama at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, so what's the point of putting an agenda forward, because all he's going to do is negate it with his veto pen. But I like to remind people that under Bill Clinton, we reformed welfare.
Right.
We balanced the budget for the first time in 40 years. We cut taxes. We passed the partial birth abortion ban. It's true he vetoed it, but even though he vetoed it 2 or 3 times, it became law as soon as George W. Bush was in office. So there is a value to advancing an agenda, even when checked by a veto, because you're laying down a marker and you're putting forth a vision of where you want to take the country. So I think it's been a missed opportunity for the Republicans. I'm not sure how big of a price they're going to pay for it, because without getting into the prediction business, and I'm not a prognosticator or a prophet, they may have such a good election cycle that they may be lulled into thinking that it didn't matter. But I think it does matter, because when you roll out of bed the morning after the election, you don't just want a short-term political victory, you want a mandate.
Right.
And the way to have a mandate is to have laid down a marker of where you want to take the country before the election happens. Look, I want to repeal Obamacare too, but elections are not about the past. They're not just about erasing Obama's failures. Elections are about the future. They're about where you want to go and how your plan for America's future has specific, tangible benefits for the American people. How's it going to affect their life in a more positive way? If it's Keystone Pipeline and energy independence, you talk about lower gas prices. If it's job creation, you talk about prosperity. If it's moral values, you talk about stronger families and better marriages and more intact families, and government strengthening marriages and families rather than undermining them. These are the things that we need to be doing, in my opinion, Kerby.
And the thing I appreciate so much about your book and even about your plan is you get into things that oftentimes you don't necessarily associate conservatives or Republicans talking about, things like welfare. I mean, you're not the only one. Jack Kemp and others have as well. But I mean, I'm just saying that as you really lay out that broad plan, a lot of independents that think, well, if I really am concerned about the poor, I've got to vote Democratic. If I'm really concerned about choice issues, I've got to vote Democratic. If I'm really concerned about big business, I mean, there's sometimes where the rhetoric doesn't connect to the individual voter. and to help them understand how this plan for the future of America not only helps them, but helps their friends, their neighbors, their coworkers, those in need. I think you've got a much more significant winning strategy. But you were talking about a mandate. Let's talk about one other one real quickly, referendum. This president has been saying this election is a referendum on his policies, which I think would cause a lot of Democratic candidates to cringe. But if you look at the latest Gallup poll, they find that 32% of voters say that their midterm vote will send a message that they oppose President Obama. Only 20% said that their vote will send a message of support for the president. Those numbers are even different than 2010, as I understand. I think they have gone up for the opposition and gone down for the actual support. So how much, for at least some voters, is this a referendum on Obama's policies?
Well, I think Obama said it very well. He probably wishes he could take it back. He's tried to walk it back and clarify it since then. I think he gave a talk over the weekend and said our values and our principles are on the ballot. But the fact is that the Democratic incumbents who are in the fight of their lives, people like Mark Pryor in Arkansas and Mary Landrieu in Louisiana, Kay Hagan in North Carolina, just to take three examples, every single one of them voted for Obamacare. Every single one of them owns that vote. This is the defining domestic policy achievement of his presidency. Okay? So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, you take his famous address, I want to say it's from May of 2009, Cairo University speech, where he calls for a new beginning between the West and the Muslim world. And as he so often does, personalizes it and makes it about him. Talks about the fact that he grew up in a Muslim country, in Indonesia, that he remembered the call for prayer, that he apologized, in effect, for past U.S. arrogance and insolence in its relations with the rest of the world, and in particular the Muslim world, and he said it's going to be different. And look where we are not 6 years later, Kerby.
Yes.
You've had the Muslim Brotherhood take power in Egypt, and then the country descended into chaos, bloodshed, and now a quasi-authoritarian military regime. The Sinai Peninsula turned into a Wild West overrun by terrorist organizations and was a major factor in the destabilization of Gaza. You have a terrorist organization, Hamas, funded by Iran, that has fired thousands of missiles into Israel. You have a bloodthirsty dictator in Syria who has killed 150,000 innocent civilians of his own country. And in the vacuum created by that chaos, the rise of ISIS, which is now in the process of creating a caliphate that stretches all the way from the Euphrates on the outskirts of Aleppo to the banks of the Tigris on the outskirts of Baghdad. The Anbar province is about to fall to ISIS. They're about to take a major town on the road to Baghdad. 60,000 innocent Christian civilians in Mosul have had to flee for their lives, and the Kurds are afraid they're going to be left for dead. And I could go on and on. I mean, I could talk about Libya, talk about Ukraine. The foreign policy of this administration makes Jimmy Carter look competent. And for every one of these candidates, they can try to run, but they can't hide from their association with those failed policies. And I think it is a referendum. I think he's going to be thunderously rejected at the polls in 21, 22 days. And, who's going to control which chamber and by how much, I can't tell you, because there are just too many races within the margin of error. But the fact that Democratic candidates don't want to be seen with him, don't want to campaign with him, and are seeking to distance themselves from him tells you really all you need to know.
Very good. Ralph Ray, just before I let you go, again, we want to encourage people to go to your website, and we have that link, Faith and Freedom Coalition. Of course, if you also go to our election resources, we have a link there as well, because you've done such an outstanding job of really helping us understand where members of Congress have voted, and then giving us a little bit more understanding of some of these key races. So we encourage people to be educated voters, and I appreciate the fact that you have been so involved over the years to educate Christians. We just need to get them to go out and vote responsibly. So thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Great to be with you, Kerby. Keep up the great work yourself.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, let's take some of those phone calls. 1-800-351-1212. If you see a particular race that you've been paying attention to, we'd like to hear from you. And, of course, there have been some bigger issues that have surfaced just in the last few days. Ralph Reed talked about this issue of ISIS and foreign policy. There are a lot of people that say if the president doesn't quickly decide to ban flights from these three countries that are ravaged by Ebola, that could be a campaign issue. What are your thoughts? Should we ban those flights? Should that be a campaign issue? Should we be concerned about some of the health pronouncements, public health pronouncements from the CDC? Love to get your thoughts. 1-800-351-1212. We'll take a break and take some of your phone calls right after this.
Now, back to Point of View.
your listener-supported source for truth.
Let's open the phones, 1-800-351-1212. We'll get to those phone calls in just a minute. You know, Ralph Reed was talking about what is happening internationally, and I thought just real quickly, I'd just read a paragraph from Brett Stevens' column today that was in the Wall Street Journal, because he calls it the Obama Survival Manual International Edition. What he was getting at is that there are people overseas that wonder whether or not the United States is going to stand and fight. And so he, in the middle of this column, says, imagine if you're one of the pro-democracy student leaders in Hong Kong, or the president of Estonia, or another country in Vladimir Putin's sights, or an anti-ISIS Sunni tribal sheikh in Iraq, or a commander in the Kurdish Peshmerga, or a fighter in what remains of the Free Syrian Army, or the new president of Afghanistan, or the prime minister of Israel. What are you going to do then? How are you going to navigate a world in which you can no longer expect the United States to serve as a faithful ally and reliable buffer between you and your enemies? And he goes on and talks about the fact that one of these individuals has been kind of a pro-democracy Russian, came to their offices just the other day in New York, and they were talking about how there was really nobody challenging Vladimir Putin. And he said, in Russia, everyone understands that America is not ready to fight. End of discussion. Or another pro-American former prime minister of Moldova, in which obviously Russia has clear designs, told him a few months ago, right now Russia is fighting two wars, an energy war and an information war. Nobody's fighting back. So this is another issue that may not surface in the election, but it's certainly a question of who's going to defend those that deserve defense, who are going to stand, if not with military arms, at least with rhetoric and various kinds of emotional support of those that really are looking for democracy, freedom, and opportunity to turn back the terrorists, when you don't have the sense that the United States has a will to not only fight, but even a will to defend the ideals of American culture. So those are all very important issues. But let's, as we go along here, take some phone calls. Go to the state of Kentucky first. Richard, what would you like to share with us today?
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. I think we definitely need to ban flights from West Africa for the time being until this Ebola epidemic is over. And I think we need to make this clear. I think you referred to a poll in which 67% of the public have already said that that's what they want. And I know I heard an interview between a Washington physician who called into the Rush Limbaugh show, and this physician said that the virus can be contagious even before it can be detected.
I did hear that interview, and he was saying that when you're asymptomatic, let's just explain that to our listeners here. In other words, you don't have a fever yet, your body is developing the virus. Recognize that when the virus goes into your body, then it replicates, and then finally you have the symptoms. And what he was saying is, in most cases, a majority of the cases, you only get it after you show symptoms. But as I've pointed out before, those symptoms are not unique. In other words, they're the same kind of symptoms you'd get if you had a cold, or certainly if you had the flu, until they become so intense it's pretty obvious you have something other than the flu. So what he was saying is, because people could get the Ebola virus from people that are asymptomatic, that is, people that don't know they have the virus, that I think makes a pretty strong case for banning flights from certain countries. And you hate to do this to countries like Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, and maybe I think on Rush Limbaugh's show they even talked about Nigeria. But somewhere along the line we have to inject some common sense into this. Richard, I'll give you the last point.
Yeah. Well, all the screening systems that they've described so far have been full of holes and can be scammed and corrupted very easily. And I think we need to make it clear to Obama and his administration that we, the American people, are no longer going to accept any more of their lies for political grabs, for political power grabs, which is what they've been doing ever since Fast and Furious, onto Benghazi, onto the IRS, onto the NSA, It's just been every time we turn around, they're lying for political power grabs. Obama and his administration, and we need to put some restraints on that man before he takes our country all the way down the drain.
Appreciate your phone call. Let's take another one. Mitchie in South Carolina, what would you like to share with us today?
Hello.
Hello.
First-time caller. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You're on the air.
Yes. Well, I have to say that President Obama, he's sort of taken a back seat on a lot of these issues. And, hopefully when we get another white Christian male in there, they'll be able to drop bombs and burn down them villages and just get those Islam Arabs and just burn them and take them straight to hell.
Well, again, I'm always looking for intelligent comments, but I guess I'll keep looking. Let's go to Stacy in New Hampshire. Stacy, what would you like to share with us today?
Yes, hi. I'm just calling to comment on the fact of whether or not the president should ban flights from coming into America.
Sure. What would you say?
I would say absolutely no, do not allow them. Definitely ban them. I am a woman with lupus, and therefore my immune system is rather low.
Sure. I think of the elderly, think of young, think of people that have HIV infections, lupus. I mean, already you have a compromised immune system, right?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Good point. Let me keep moving because I want to give as many callers a chance to join our conversation, and we're running tight on time here, so let's go to the state of Georgia. Dwayne, what would you say?
Yes, you asked should the fact that the president will not ban flights to these African nations should become a campaign issue. I most definitely think it should become a campaign issue because people have been telling the president that you need to ban flights to these countries, and he won't do it. And the fact that he won't seal up the border. I was listening to Jay Sekulow program the other day. He said there could be as many as 40 ISS terrorists now in our country, but the president still will not seal up the border. So I think that should become a campaign issue too. But the thing that is frustrating to me, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that is Republicans are not speaking out on these issues,
yes.
And I feel that could come back to hurt them in the election.
Let me real quickly emphasize that since we're coming to a break, and we might get to some more calls a little bit later, but I thought it was interesting that in this piece that I mentioned from Don Feder, he quoted from David Horowitz, who's been on this program before, and he at one point said, I guess David Horowitz said that the issue of security and defense has been tepid, diffuse, and easily missed. Of course, we've just mentioned Rush Limbaugh. He said, can anyone tell me what the Republican Party stands for when it comes to amnesty? Eric Erickson of Red State said, have you noticed the Republicans have given up a concentrated effort against Obamacare, and on and on and on. You can't be successful if the only argument you're sort of giving is, well, we're not as bad as the other guy. I mean, that's just not going to work very well. Like I said, shop at Macy's because all the other stores aren't as good as we are. No, you got to give me a good reason to shop at Macy's, right? Come to my church because, well, we're better than the other church down the street. Well, I need a little bit more, and I think campaigns right now are suffering because some are not willing to make those distinctions, number one. Number two, paint a positive image. We have one of those mandatory breaks. I see some really good calls on the line. Can you hang on here? We'll see what we can pull together here, but we have one of those important breaks that come up at the top of the hour, so let's take that right now. As we go to the break, this is a good time for you to go to our election resources. This is the very middle button there on our website. We have documents, we have voter guides, we have books, articles, videos, a way that you can double check to make sure you and your family are registered to vote. It's all on the website, pointofview.net. Today we're releasing our Christians in Politics video, the uncensored video series that we will be announcing, and you will see that on our Facebook page tonight, so take the time to watch it. Hit that share button, send it on to some others, and we're going to take a break. We're going to hear a little bit from Bobby Schuller. He's going to talk about the Hour of Power. Then we're going to get back into all those issues, and if we don't get your call in this hour, we'll get it next hour because some of you have some good things to say, but I have to take a break. So we'll be back right after this.
Across the nation, this is Point of View. For materials offered during the broadcast, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour, if you'd like to join us a little bit later, we'll open up the phones again to give you a chance to join our conversation. 1-800-351-1212. We'll continue some of the conversation we had in the first hour. But I thought as a nice change of pace, you might like to now have a chance to hear from Bobby Schuller. He is a minister and author. Matter of fact, he's the lead pastor of Hour of Power, weekly televised service to millions around the world, as well as, of course, the pastor at Shepherd's Grove Congregation, the Tree of Life community in Garden Grove, California. He has a bachelor's degree from Oral Roberts University, as well as a Master of Divinity degree from Fuller Theological Seminary, author of such books as Imagine Happiness, A Simple Guide, as well as the trilogy, Know the Love of God Forever, Love Your Soul as God Loves You, and Know the Love of God to Others. And Bobby, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Kerby, hi. So glad to be here.
We have certainly been talking about a lot of issues in the news, but I thought we'd back out for just a few minutes to get to know you a little bit better. We have a link to Hour of Power, which I suspect many people already know, but they can go to that web link. We've also posted your video, which I think is maybe a good place to start, because we encourage people to watch the videos, to click on that and hit the share button and share it with others. But as you were in front of the camera, talking about your vision for the future of Our Power, I thought you did a very good job of sort of casting the vision on where you want to take that television program. Can you share that with our audience?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot behind the story. We shot at Rancho Capistrano because that's, my dad started his church there. So people ask me all the time, what was it like growing up at the Crystal Cathedral? And I always say, I don't know, ask my cousins, because I was really wasn't there very often. And my dad had this awesome church at Rancho Capistrano. It was a big ranch. It was kind of a mom and pop kind of church, and we had chili cook-offs and a choir, and we sang hymns, and it was just kind of your classic Reformed church, and it was probably 400 or 500 people, and just a great environment. The guy at the door greeting everybody, and that's kind of always been the way I've sort of thought of like an ideal church, just a community of disciples and mission, living in their community. And after my dad left and went up to the cathedral and that kind of all went away, I started going to the ranch regularly to kind of pray. I actually spent almost all day Friday there to kind of pray and think through what God would want us to do in our church and through sermon series and just even my own personal life. And it was really there that we began to think about a new kind of Hour of Power and what it could be like.
Well, and I think that's what I'd like to focus on, because I sense that there's a real desire to get back to kind of biblical teaching, and also to use this in a way to attract not only the seeker, but the skeptic. In other words, the person who says, spirituality really isn't important for me. And I grew up in California. You live in California right now, and a number of the stations that actually carry this program are in California. But for the people around the country, if you are in California or the West Coast, or you're in the Northeast, you're in a place where people aren't that tied into religious ideas. They might say, well, I don't go to church, but I have maybe a little interest in spiritual things, but I don't think about it that often. And I see you wanting to reach out to that unreached people group, if you will, those individuals that aren't necessarily likely to come into the door of a church, but might be intrigued by what you're doing on television. Is that right?
Yeah, Kerby, that's exactly right. I mean, we, in our environment here, one of the things I think often as evangelicals we can forget is that we may be preaching the gospel, but sometimes we're preaching it in a different kind of cultural language. And I think what happens sometimes when people preach it in that new cultural language, the message can get lost, and we certainly don't want to do that. But one of the big messages, I think that especially here around LA, that one of the big languages that's used is narrative, like stories.
Right.
And we really want to capture that. We want to get into using more stories and less of just a televised church worship service. So that was kind of one of the big changes, is that Hour of Power has always been
very wise.
A linear, it's like, here's a linear church service from beginning to end. And you want people who don't know anything about church to sort of understand a liturgy that's old and very different from the world they live in. And while in many ways that captures the minds of some people, it forgets the sort of language, the missional language we need to remember if we want to bring the gospel to people who've never heard it, who've never been to church. So, yeah, so some of the things we're doing is we're trying to break up the service a bit, where you kind of go in the church and out of the church. So you're in the church and you hear the choir sing, and then you go out of the church and you see a story, film of a guy who, short film, 5 minutes, a guy who overcame some difficult circumstance, and then go back into a church for the sermon, and you go back out of the church to interview someone, and it's kind of this. It has more of a journey motif where you're in several different spaces, different times, and it's much more engaging for the viewer, and I think speaks that narrative language.
I would certainly agree. Certainly have seen some that have tried to do a little of that. Certainly, D. James Kennedy for a while was doing some of that, but I think what you are doing is reaching the next generation. And you don't know me, but one of the reasons I was interested in talking to you is because we are trying to do this at Point of View. Marlon Maddox was the host of this program for many years and really has established the radio program. But we came to realize, more than a decade ago, that the younger you are, people your age and younger, are less likely to listen to radio, but they will still benefit from the things that happen on radio. So we've really been working to reach the next generation and turn a radio ministry into a full media ministry. And we're encouraging people to watch these videos. We're releasing a new video today, for example, and to do things on social media and on and on and on. And I see you recognizing that same thing. It is not likely that a 20-something or 30-something is going to sit back and watch a Crystal Cathedral service or even a service in even a contemporary church, but one that tells the story, one that carries you on a journey, are more likely to watch. And that, I think, is why I appreciate the vision that you have there at Hour of Power. It's kind of a different vision, but it's still understanding the need to preach the gospel.
Yeah, and actually the Crystal Cathedral piece has a lot to do with that as well, though. We're not in the Crystal Cathedral anymore.
Sure.
It belongs to the Catholic Church, and we did essentially a church swap. So we got another big, beautiful church, but it's nothing like it. Yeah. Yeah, so there's lots of levels about why you can't just have a normal kind of church service filmed, and then people are going to be compelled to watch, a regular church service from beginning to end. And it's been interesting because we're getting kind of a polarized response.
I can believe it. I need to take a break. Can I come back? Because I want to talk a little bit about that. And of course, there's some people that have wondered, okay, what's kind of going to be the theological integrity of this? And, how wide are you going to define Christianity? And, of course, the reaction to this and some other very important issues we'll put on the table. Then we're going to come back to some of the conversation we've had, but I thought you would appreciate hearing a little bit more from Bobby Schuller. And you can watch the video that we have available there, and would encourage you to hit that share button. We also have a link in our web links to Hour of Power, so you can follow it there as well. So let's take a break. If you have a question for Bobby Schuller, certainly we're going to be taking a lot of questions in the last half hour of the program, but if you have a question for him, I'll open up the phones for that, 1-800-351-1212, and perhaps you're one of those ones that used to watch Hour of Power and wonder where it's going. Maybe you're somebody that said, no, I've never really watched it before, but kind of intriguing me now about what that new format might look like. So we'll give you that opportunity if you'd like to join us. We'll take a break and continue our conversation right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
Most of the concern expressed about Obamacare focuses on the immediate impact while ignoring the long-term effects of the law. Dr. Merrill Matthews explains in a recent column that the bigger problem will arise in a few years. Insurance actuaries call this problem a health care death spiral. In the near term, many will experience sticker shock when they discover how much their insurance premiums will cost them. Those most affected will be likely young and healthy people who live in states that manage to keep health insurance premiums relatively low. On the other hand, people with chronic illnesses or other expensive medical conditions will be joining exchanges. Many of the larger health insurers are actually avoiding these exchanges because they believe that just such people will be joining the exchanges and have medical conditions that will be expensive to treat. The costs might exceed the premiums they're able to collect. Meanwhile, the young and healthy are likely to avoid joining an exchange since they will be charged much more under Obamacare than they would have been paid in the past. The law is designed to overcharge the young and healthy so that older and sicker people can be charged less. The problem only gets worse in subsequent years. As a disproportionate number of sick people enroll in the pool, the cost of an insurance policy will rise. These premium increases will drive healthy people out of the pool looking for lower rates that match their healthy condition. As the pool gets smaller and sicker, rates will go up once again. That will drive out another wave of people until the pool is very small and very sick. This is what insurance actuaries call a death spiral. Put simply, the challenge at the moment is to get young and healthy people to sign up for exchanges, but the bigger challenge in the future will be to get them to stay once they find out how unaffordable Obamacare is for them. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Schuller with us for a few more minutes. Again, lead pastor for Hour of Power, as well as an individual at Shepherd's Grove Congregation, the Tree of Life community in Garden Grove. And Bobby, you were talking about the reaction, and I'm sure there are some that say, this is really exciting. You're maybe moving in a new direction. I'm sure there are others that are saying, wait a minute, where's the old Hour of Power that we came to know and love? Tell us about the reaction.
Yeah, so we've gotten a pretty polarized response, and we're getting a handful, just like you said, some people who say, this program's amazing, we love it, this is fantastic, and other people who are like, we hate it, this is horrible. So we're really kind of dealing with that, and it kind of feels like one of those kind of new wine in old wineskin kind of things. I felt with the old Hour of Power a bit, oftentimes like the style and the way that it was shot didn't fit my personality or sermons. I think some people are concerned about the music because I'm a young guy and we have traditional music, and sometimes I think that means that traditional music is going away. And we're certainly not doing that. We still have our choir and our, sacred hymns and stuff like that. What people also don't understand is that that's the music I love. I mean, I grew up with those hymns and I grew up with those choirs. So for me, that's still very special and I think has a special place. Even in a missional context. But
again, you're talking about reaching a younger demographic. I mean, now the oldest listeners were young listeners when this started under Robert Schuller. Yeah. So you're really talking about trying to capture a new audience and continue to minister to an existing audience. And that's a real challenge. So what are some of the things that I think are important in reaching out to, I guess, what would be the millennial generation?
Yeah, so I think the first thing we want to avoid is we don't want to lose that old viewing loyal group. I mean, they have kept us afloat through so many challenging times. We're so grateful for them, but we're also been hearing from them we know you love us, but reach out to our kids, our grandkids, this type of thing. And so we're doing that. So one of the things that was really getting in the way from millennials, honestly, was the way we were asking for money. That was a big deal.
I was going to get to that. So go into that. I'm glad you anticipated my next question.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah. I mean, like when you watch the program, and maybe the sermon is something that's meaningful to you, or the content is good. I mean, that's obviously, I'm already doing that, but you don't need to change production to do that. But you're watching the program, and then all of a sudden, a 6-minute ask for donations comes on, where the ask talks about all the reasons we need money, all the reasons we need support, and then says, if you send us $50, we'll send you a pearl bracelet. If you send us $30, we're going to send you, this wind chime. And we have all of these methods for fundraising on the television program that when millennials see it, they go, oh, that is not for me. Because really, we're trying to teach people to be disciples and to give out of joy and to give because you love people, because you give because you believe in Jesus, not to give because you want a tchotchke, And that even principle is coming through in the sermons, but then when millennials see that piece there, I think a lot of them turn the program off. So I think that was the biggest, we need to stop doing this kind of fundraising as soon as possible. And we replaced that with telling stories of people whose lives have been changed by Hour of Power, and then just saying, listen, it's expensive to do the Hour of Power. If you want us to stay on the air, you need to help us. This takes a village, and we need everyone to contribute. So it seems to be working so far.
Well, again, I recognize that millennials, perhaps more than any generation, because they have been sold not only on television but on computers, because it's a generation that grew up around in computers. They have a very finely tuned baloney detector, a very finely tuned marketing detector, and that is somebody's trying to sell me something, and I know that that's going to backlash if indeed you really want to lower the median age of your viewership, which is, of course, always been one of the biggest challenges for Christian television, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has been. That there's such a distrust already because you're on television. There's already the lights, the camera, and that seems, and some of that grinds against, I think, what people think of when they think of true religion and they think of caring for the poor, and that the celebrity kind of piece that sometimes goes hand in hand with televangelism can be off-putting. So I think when you pair that with kind of then asking for money, it's like, oh, they just want my money, and then of course you hurt your vision and your mission, and we really got to walk that line finely.
Sure. One other question I think a lot of people have had, and I've noticed it even when I went to the YouTube video that we've posted there, people saying, well, I'm excited that they're coming back to the Bible. I mean, I guess the argument used to be that sometimes an Hour of Power, we'd have some people and Robert Schuller would bring them forward and you go, I'm not even sure they're a Christian. I'm not sure where they are theologically and some of that. I get the sense that you really want to come back to biblical teaching and center the television program on a biblical view, not be so influenced by some of the cultural trends that have been affecting even Christian television in the recent decades.
Yeah, I love the Bible, and I teach straight out of the Bible, and my only goal in ministry is to make disciples. That's it. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. In defense of my grandpa, he got a lot of heat, especially as an evangelical, and some would have even thrust him sort of out of that circle. He told it to me this way. He said, when I was in ministry, he said, there were 3 types of people. There were the people that planted the seed, there were people that nurtured the seed and watched it grow, and there were people that gathered the harvest. And he said, I wasn't any of those 3. I was the guy that tilled the soil. Mm-hmm. And he said, I was the guy that went to people that wanted nothing to do with religion, and I didn't even get them to necessarily believe in the Bible or God all the time. What I did was soften them up so that someone else could come along and do that. And so I think there really was, my grandpa really did impact a lot of lives, and actually really did reach a lot of people for the gospel. But I know that a lot of people had a lot of distrust because he wasn't always preaching the Bible, or it wasn't always clear that the gospel was being presented in the sermons. And one interesting story, 3-4 years ago, I was on a fishing trip with him, and I just asked him, I said, Grandpa, what is the greatest regret you have in ministry? You know what he said?
What?
He said, I didn't preach the Bible enough.
There we go. And I think you're learning that lesson. And, you know, they always used to say that's not your father's Oldsmobile. Well, you know, that's not your grandfather's Hour of Power anymore. And I got that sense when I began to see some of the videos that you had available. And I really do commend you for really wanting to make disciples and to preach God's word. And I think that is encouraging, and it's certainly something that should attract viewers. And most importantly, I hope that as you have that vision of attracting even not only just the seekers, but even maybe the skeptics to say, okay, I'll give you a hearing because you seem like somebody I can relate to, and I'm going to watch this program for a while, and maybe in the process they'll come to know the Lord. So I'm very encouraged by what are the direction you seem to be taking it, and I'm encouraging our listeners to watch it. But as people go to the website, we have a link here to Hour of Power. What can they find, and how can they find out more?
Yeah, so, I mean, our website has a lot about what we're doing. We're actually going to be undergoing a new website soon. They can go to my Twitter, Facebook. My Twitter handle is @BobbySchuller. My Facebook is just Bobby Schuller. And on our website, hourofpower.org, we'll have all the stations and ways that people can watch. They can even watch the program there. It goes on the website, I think, Thursday night or Friday morning, and can kind of see what we're doing.
I might just mention, if you go to our button that says Today on Point of View, go down and you will see Bobby Schuller's picture, and then you will see his Twitter handle. You will see the Twitter handle also for Hour of Power. You'll see the Facebook handle and all the other information. So in case he said that too quickly and you didn't know where to go, it is right there on our website, pointofview.net. And, of course, we have listeners in 43 different states. So, again, check the local listings to find out when Hour of Power might be airing in your particular locale. And, Bobby, I appreciate you being with us today here on Point of View.
Hey, Kerby, it was such a privilege. Thank you for the opportunity.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get back into some of those issues in the news. So we would love to hear from you. Some of you that were on hold before, now is your opportunity to call back in, because we're going to be talking about a couple of things. One, of course, is this election and how important it is to get good information. And so that's why we spent some time with Ralph Reed in the first hour talking with him. But, of course, we've also raised this issue of Ebola and what we have learned since then. We have quite a bit of information that is just coming down, and not the least of which is the fact that the World Health Organization made an announcement now that the death rate in the Ebola epidemic has risen to 70%, up from 50%. 100 people have died of Ebola this year, while 8,900 have been stricken. Experts believe that the real number of Ebola victims is much higher. Those are simply the official figures due to, of course, the difficulties in reporting the cases. And we'll come back and talk a little bit about that as well. We know more about the nurse that has been the first American to come down with Ebola on this soil. And we recognize that it is becoming a little bit more of a puzzle as to how she may have contracted that. So that's why there are some that are saying maybe there are still things to learn about this. We also, of course, have also raised the question about her dog, a King Charles Spaniel, by the way, and they have decided to quarantine that dog rather than to put it down like they did for the dog of the nurse in Spain. So there are a number of issues on the table. And so if you are working right now in the area of the medical field, that would certainly be one question that I would love to ask of you. What kind of containment, quarantine should we use? And, of course, many of you have comments about whether or not we should ban flights. And if you still have remaining questions from the election, we'd certainly love to get your comments, too. 1-800-351-1212. We'll come back with more and your phone calls right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We'll take lots of phone calls, and if you would like to join us, open line for this last half hour. Let's start off in Georgia, talking to Anna. Thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on something I'd heard on a Christian radio station recently. I believe it was the Lifeway Institute that recently conducted a poll among evangelical Christians about what they prayed about on a daily basis, and they listed 5 topics. None of the 5 included this country, and I was really shocked to hear that, and so I just wanted to let that be known and to affirm why Christians need to listen to Point of View and why we need to support this ministry, because as somebody's already commented on the scripture earlier, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, and I just am concerned because I think it may be later than most of us think.
I think so. You know, that idea of prayer, as a matter of fact, have a piece today by Robert Knight. I'd love to get him here. He's talking about we're living in the age of insanity. And he goes through example after example after example, and then ties it into a British rock group that had as its lyrics, it's the age of insanity, and then goes on through all those things. But he ends this talking about this insanity that we need to acknowledge that we seem to have some people that sort of, as he puts it, lost their minds, are running the culture and the government and everything else. But he ends it by saying, in the meantime, prayers for our country would do wonders. And I think it is important for the fact that even though we do talk a lot of the problems here, we certainly need to be in prayer. When you ask even people that agree with their president, whether it's George Bush in the past or Barack Obama now, if they pray for their president, well, a few do, but most don't. And we're admonished in 1 Timothy 2 to pray for those in leadership, and that would be not only your president, but your Supreme Court justices, your governor, your state senator, your state representative, your United States senators, your representative. There's our key 16, as I call them, that we should be praying for, and we should be praying for our country. And it's just amazing. You know, we pray for our needs, but we don't pray for our country, and we need to turn that around. So I appreciate you reminding us about that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for calling in today, and matter of fact, calling back, because I know you tried to call in before. Let's, we're going to talk a little bit about Ebola, I think, in just a minute. Let's go to Angie in Ohio, WGGN. Thank you for calling in today.
You're welcome. I was listening to your program, and my husband and I really enjoy your program. We were just talking, I'm listening about your program about the nurse with the Ebola. And, you know, not always is it the nurse's fault. A lot of times I'm an emergency room, have been an emergency room nurse and an intensive care nurse, and worked in the field, and we have equipment that isn't as strong as it used to be because of the cutbacks and things. So our gloves are not as strong. Our gowns are not as thick as they used to be. So you can actually fill a rubber glove up and have water come out of them. Some of us have already had blood on our hands.
Wow.
So our materials that we're working with are not as good as they or as strong as they used to be. So I'm not sure if that could be her case or not, but it has happened. So it's just hard.
Well, it certainly is, and I think what you're pointing out is there was a sense in which the director of the Centers for Disease Control sounded like they were throwing her under the bus the other day. So he came back and said, well, it maybe violated protocol, but I love this piece here because they said that, Nita Pham, who, by the way, is Vietnamese, a Catholic, and from looking at her church, probably born again. I mean, always hard to tell when you read it looking from the outside in, but looks very devoted. Teaches a Bible class and all the rest. But she was willing to take on one of the toughest jobs in that hospital. But at the same time, we're starting to wonder when you kind of trace her steps, and those of us in Dallas hear a lot more than you do because we're kind of right at ground zero here, to really figure out what happened. There doesn't seem to be any break in protocol, so you're putting, I think, on the table something that needs to be considered, and that is, were the gloves sufficient? Were the gowns sufficient? Were the protocols maybe too optimistic? Very good questions I think you've put on the table today.
yeah, I just hope that they kind of maybe look into that and see, because all of us in the healthcare field are at risk for things. And, yeah, due to the cutbacks and things, it's also affected our gear, our protective gear that we've used. So we used to use respirators and things. They've kind of cut out on some of that stuff. You know, it's a little different now.
Very good. Angie, I appreciate you calling in and sharing that with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for your program. We really enjoy it.
Thank you for listening. Let's go to Blair in the state of Texas, another person that called back, and I appreciate your willingness to do so. Blair, what's on your mind?
Yes, first-time caller. I'm curious about Ted Cruz, and, you know, I don't know if he can run for president or not. I don't think he's really trying. I really would like to see someone like him run, someone with his beliefs, and you know, but is it going to take, can he run? And if not, is there somebody out there that you know, looking at running with, you know, with his beliefs, and, you know, or is it going to take a secular, you know, Republican to maybe get in office and, you know, do the things that Republicans need to do?
Well, again, it's 2 years early, but if you wonder if he's running, he's shown all the signs of an individual that is running. You could look at his speech at the Values Voters Summit. You can look at some of the people he's tried to attract around him. You can look at what Rand Paul and a few others have done. There's now word even just today in the news about people suggesting and encouraging Mitt Romney to make another run for it. Of course, Marco Rubio, I think, has been running for some time. I think you're going to have a pretty crowded field. Now, in terms of eligibility, he thinks he's eligible, but I think it's a good question for those of us that really believe in the Constitution, because you might remember, if you go all the way back to 2008, there was even a hearing in Congress as to whether or not the two candidates were indeed eligible. And in particular, the question was, if somebody who is born, say, in Panama is eligible, and of course, in this case, the candidate was, but here you have Ted Cruz born in Canada, but both of his parents were not American citizens at the time. So I think there's some question that is surrounding that. And when we've had even Joseph Farah on one time, when somebody was talking about Marco Rubio, he says, well, I don't think even he's eligible to run. So we'll have to see how this plays itself out, because it is an important issue, and I think he believes he is eligible, and everybody so far has acted as if he's eligible. But you're asking a question that some of us that tend to be constitutional literates still need to have resolved. So it's a good question, and I think we'll, over the next couple of weeks, especially after the 2014 election, that really then kicks off the possibility for the presidential run. That's when I think those questions need to be answered, and maybe we can even get him on the program here and ask him.
That is secular.
Yeah. Well, and I think we might end up with some, you know, individuals that aren't necessarily Christian per se, but are secular candidates up there as well. So, you know, and I think maybe last time Donald Trump fits a little more into that category, and some of those kinds of people. Yeah. I don't think he's running this time, but I'm just saying, who knows? I do believe that before it's all through, some people that we haven't even mentioned right now might become front runners, and that is governors. There is a sense in which the American people generally will support a governor for the presidency, because after all, it's an executive office. There are a few exceptions, but those are the exceptions. You can think of 1960, where, of course, you had John Kennedy elected, and he was a senator. Of course, you have now Barack Obama as a one-term senator elected, but generally, we like governors. Governor Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or Governor Ronald Reagan, Governor Jimmy Carter, Governor Bill Clinton, Governor George W. Bush. You see a trend here, and I think that governors might still have an edge, because Americans already sense that they have been in the executive office of a state. They are perhaps a little better attuned to being the executive officer of a country. But we'll see how it goes. Somebody else that is going to be running, and that's going to get us to our next call here with James, KJRT. James, I think you want to talk about Hillary Clinton. Go for it.
Yeah, you know, I wonder how many people know that that she's being set up to run for president with this program that they have on TV today called Madam Secretary. I think it's very, very funny that in the last couple of years, anybody that these people want in office, they always have a program or a show that depicts them as this super intellectual, smart person that always gets the job done. My old director used to tell me a long time ago, he said, if I can make you think, I can help you. And that's my thought. If I can make people think, we won't vote for the wrong person again.
Well, let me just mention real quick, for people not familiar, Madam Secretary, very well-written program, just like West Wing. I've tried to watch it just like I used to watch West Wing. Love the program, but at the same time, you do have to wonder if there's an agenda. That is, this is a way to show that a person that has served as Secretary of State, a woman that has served as Secretary of State, would be competent and even maybe should be favored as president. So obviously there's probably a political agenda there as well. It's a well-written program, but we'll come back and take some more phone calls right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Let's go to Dean in Kentucky, KYGE. What would you like to share with us today?
I just want to make a couple of comments. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
First of all, this Ebola situation, banning flights to and from these countries, why don't the airlines take it on themselves to take some action? Why do we have to always depend upon so-called government to do things for us? They are so greedy, they don't want to give up that passenger haul, I'm sure. And the second thing was dealing with praying. We need to read 2 Chronicles 7:14. This is where the secret lies to our country. praying that Obama will do this or that isn't going to accomplish anything, I don't feel, because I personally feel he's a child of the devil because he supports killing babies. And I don't think any Christian could ever do a thing like that. So I do not support him. I will pray that God will give him a Damascus Road type conversion experience, though, so that we can see him turn around. So thanks for taking my call.
Dean, appreciate that. Dean talked about this idea of banning flights. There's another issue I might put on the table. We probably won't have a lot of time to talk about it, but I'd love to get some comments from some of you. And that is, should we perhaps, if we do have an Ebola outbreak, actually take them to centers which are actually best able to handle that? This New York Times article that came out the other day was a good illustration of that. They said as doctors and nurses in Emory, when we had the first patient and then a second one after that, worked to keep desperately ill patients alive in August, the county threatened to disconnect Emory University from the sewer lines if Ebola waste went down the drain. The company that hauled medical trash to the incinerator refused to take it used on an Ebola patient unless it was sterilized first. Couriers could not drive the patient's blood samples a few blocks away for testing at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and pizza places would not deliver to staff members in any part of the hospital. By the way, if you've seen the pictures of the cafeteria right now at Presbyterian Hospital, there's nobody there. I mean, nobody's coming. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And so some people have suggested that it might be better to transfer patients to designated centers with special expertise in treating Ebola. Well, that winds it down to really four. The first one I mentioned, of course, is Emory University. The second one would be the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. The third would be the Nebraska Medical Center in Omaha, and then the fourth would be St. Patrick Hospital in Missoula, Montana. Isn't it interesting? We have one in Montana, one in Nebraska, then, of course, one in Georgia and one in Maryland. But that is the argument. And, of course, what we've heard from everyone so far is it's not a big deal. Every hospital should be able to handle this. I don't want to gross anybody out that might be thinking about eating lunch right about now, because those of you in the West Coast, but let me just mention, without getting into a lot of the gory details, that, for example, Ebola patients lose an enormous amount of fluid from vomiting and diarrhea, as much as 5 to 10 quarts a day during the worst part of the illness. That's what kills most of them. And so that's why they need dialysis. That's why they need to be rehydrated. That's why they need electrolytes. That's why, in some cases, they need ventilators. But also at Emory, they found that the health workers were more exposed than they thought they might be. For example, they found that as the patients grew sicker, the levels of the virus in their blood rose dramatically, and thus they became more and more contagious. Fluids and even on their skin. At the peak of the illness, an Ebola patient can have 10 billion viral particles in 1/5 of a teaspoon of blood. That compares to, say, 50,000 to an HIV patient, or 5 to 20 million for hepatitis C. So in some respects, what's called the R0, that is where the first person might be infectious, certainly things like hepatitis, AIDS, or HIV, certainly measles, have a much higher R0. Nevertheless, this one becomes more virulent because of that, and that's why one doctor said this helps us to understand why, if only the spread by body fluids, why it is more contagious than hepatitis A, B, and C, and HIV, not because it's contagious in the initial stages, but because the number of viral particles increases dramatically through the course of the disease. And so we are getting some good news right now of this nurse, Nina Pham, as I mentioned, a Catholic Vietnamese family, and has been very involved in teaching the Bible at church, graduated from TCU. She's now sent out a message through the Presbyterian Hospital that she's doing well. Of course, she received what some people call the golden blood, that is the blood that came from the previous doctor that was infected as well. So you have lots of issues that might be positive, but again, every time we turn around, we hear a story of someone else that shows Ebola-like symptoms, and of course then they have to do the blood test to determine whether or not it's simply the flu or whether they have contracted the disease as well. Let's take one more phone call real quickly if we can get to it. In Georgia, listening on the Good News Network, Taylor, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, are you there?
I'm right here. Go ahead.
All right, I read in the Wall Street Journal yesterday that the United States Army is employing a new military strategy. And the basic idea of it is that instead of trying to fight big battles on the front lines, they're going to try to do more preventive stuff and fight smaller battles. And I believe, from what I interpreted, that it was going to be more like humanitarian aid and that kind of stuff. I was going to get your point of view on that.
Yes, and my concern is that, yes, some of the battles we have are small skirmishes, and so certainly you can think of where that might work. But if indeed we ever have what could be a major battle, I mean, would we ever find ourselves in conflict with Russia, with China? Well, I think we all know what the answer to that might be. Yes, very possibly. That's the first issue. The second one is back to that word you mentioned just in passing, humanitarian. Yes, we recognize that sometimes the military is involved in humanitarian activities. When there has been a tsunami, for example, when that took place in the Southeast Asian peninsula there, they sent a battleship in there, not because they were going to fight a war, but because you have, in a sense, a floating hospital that allowed for the treatment of individuals. So I recognize that the primary responsibility for the military is to kill people and break things, as I oftentimes say. It is to be the military. And yet there's also oftentimes a secondary mission that it can have for humanitarian reasons. But we should be really rethinking whether or not we want to be in the business of nation building and humanitarian action by using the military. This is the best military in the history of the world. And I think there are some politically correct kind of ideas that are being passed around right now in the Pentagon that aren't necessarily positive. And so that's my quick answer to probably an entire program that deserves more attention. And so, Taylor, I promise you that maybe next time we have Frank Gaffney in here, since he was Assistant Secretary of Defense under Ronald Reagan, I'm sure he'll have a lot to say about it. And so you wait and listen into that program, and he'll probably give you an earful on that program as well. So thanks for calling in today.
All right, thank you.
I know that deserved more answer, but I look at my clock and I'm out of time. So we will get back to some of these very important issues. Each day I try to cover a little bit so that we can have a chance to look at some of the issues in the news. Jonathan Moore will be with us tomorrow. We're going to be talking about the Bible. Then Wayne Allen Root will get us back into this because, of course, he has all sorts of political comments, and so I think you will really enjoy the 2 hours tomorrow. And of course, we'll come back to issues from ISIS to Ebola to whatever else is in the news. But the first hour today, we spent a fair amount of time talking about the election. We probably won't do much again, but 3 weeks from today, that takes place. And so if you have not really taken the time to evaluate the candidates, we want to encourage you to go to our election resources. It's called Pray, Organize, and Vote, POV, just like Point of View. And especially go to those voter guides, because as I mentioned, we have voter guides from the American Family Association, from Christian Voice, from the Family Research Council, from the Faith and Family Coalition. We have a link to all the state groups that are linked to Focus on the Family. There are some great resources there, so please take the time to go to the website, pointofview.net, and go to the election resources for Pray, Organize, and Vote. We also have the video that we are releasing tonight. You can go to our Facebook page and see the one on Christians and politics, so we would encourage you to do that as well. We have a number of other videos for you to watch, so take the time to watch those videos. Click that share button and share them with some other individuals. I want to thank everybody for the good work they do behind the scenes. That, of course, is Andrew and Chris and Catherine. Have a great day. We will see you back here tomorrow.
You have been listening to Point of View. For materials offered on the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.